Okay, guys, this is the second episode of Inside the Machine podcast with Neural DSP, and today we have as a second guest Forrester Savell. Hey, Forrester, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
How's the weather in Australia again?
It's pretty sunny and good for almost into winter, so yeah, it's good.
Okay.
Loving it.
That's awesome. Yeah, here we're also enjoying what we have of the summer, so still warm.
Nice.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so, well, for the people that don't know you, so who are you and can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I can. I'm a producer, mixer from Australia. I've been doing it for almost 15, 16 years now. I've sort of based myself over in the eastern states. I've actually just moved up to Queensland, but I do work with a large selection of Australian bands and overseas bands as well. And I've sort of do a lot of recording in studios all around Australia and have done so overseas as well. So just sort of I guess I mainly work with rock bands or metal bands, or indie bands, anything of a genre which I enjoy listening to. So I did a bluegrass band a couple of years ago, which was great. So yeah, anything that's sort of band orientated, I really thoroughly enjoy working with.
Okay, nice. And do you start? Do you like to get your hands into the music first? Do you like more the producing stage of like tweaking the songs with the band, or you are more like just an engineer, straightforward? I record with this technique and then I mix and master and I deliver the album as it is, or you like to put your hands into the music sometimes?
Yeah, no, definitely like to get involved with the music itself and the production. I mean, in that the extent of that differs with different artists that you're working with. Some artists, they've got that under control. Other artists need a lot more help. So it varies. But I definitely feel that I need to, get hands-on with every piece of music I work on, because I feel like that's where I get the best result. If I sort of leave things to their own devices and just rely on, say, an engineering approach to it, I don't know. I feel that there's always things that bug me, and I've learnt, I guess, over the years to voice my opinion, and I guess I've built up a little bit of experience in that time that I can confidently suggest ideas and impart a bit of knowledge into the process to improve things. So definitely getting involved with the music is something that I try to do. But on the other side of the coin, I also have a nagging voice in me to let the artist be the artist, to allow the artist to have their own sound and not influence that too much. Like, I don't want to be grabbing instruments off people and playing the parts for them or anything like that, because it takes away the essence of what they are doing as the artist. So while I say I'm hands-on, I'm always just throwing suggestions to the musician and to the artist to do things differently or to change, but still within their style.
Yeah, I agree. That's a difficult balance to keep, but it's very interesting. I also like whenever it's possible to get my hands into the music of some other people, and yeah, sometimes you end up producing like more than you would like to, because there's bands that don't really have everything settled. But if the band has their essence very well settled, it's like some suggestions can go very far.
Yeah, I think the nature of what I do, and especially because I'm usually involved, in a lot of cases, involved in the production and the mixing side of things, I think my sound or whatever, my tastes are always going to rub off quite strongly on any music. So I'm vigilant to try and keep those essences of the original sound and the original vibe of a band. So I just feel like I'm hyper aware of that these days, to try and retain that, even to the point where these days I'm moving more away from templates and that sort of stuff, to try and just keep the original sound of a band going. Even in my mixing process, I'm sort of trying to try different things and retain some of the original session ideas and that sort of stuff to retain that sound.
No, that's cool. So you do some kind of like rough recording first, and then you use it as a reference to get back to the essence, to the basics, or
yeah, and trying to during a recording process, trying to pinpoint those things that's something that you do that I haven't heard another artist do. So that's a key keystone part of your music, and let's try and keep that in there. And even to the point where, like in maybe in the past, I've been super critical of things like timing and pitch. I'll kind of let more of those things go these days, purely because I think that really is the thing that if you iron all those things out, that's where everything starts to sound the same, and you start getting to these cookie cutter sounding artists because they've just had this machine-like process, the factory process put through the music put through it, and it just starts to sound like the last band you did the same process to. So I feel like identifying what those things are early on, and then not being too critical of the nuances in performance, still trying to get a good performance out of an artist, and I'm still using editing and all those sort of tricks, but just trying to retain the real artist that is performing those parts. Yeah, that's a real big focus these days.
That's a very mature way of thinking it. Like, I guess that many producers that are starting, and they're like in one of the first best points of their careers, they find their own sound as a producer, and then for some like inevitable reasons, things that projects that they work on start sounding much more or less the same, because they try to achieve the same sound that they achieved before. But I guess that with you, that you have like worked so many years on this, like now you can distinguish like what's the sound of the band itself, and you try to rescue that and apply it to your mixing. How do you think that works nowadays for you?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I definitely would have gone through a period in my past where I was trying to, like, that worked once, so let's just do it on every project, you know? And it sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I mean, your general skill level as a producer and engineer is sort of built on those discoveries. But I think, when you can sort of let go of those and go, that worked for that band, and that was one thing, and let's try and find something new and exciting for this other band. And the little nuggets of gold that I find are often with the artists themselves, especially these days. More artists are engineering and doing their own demos and recording at home and that sort of stuff. And I guess the techniques that they are just coming up with on their own, and the plugins that they're using and the sounds that they're pulling in their sessions, I sort of trying to retain that and try and build on that and learn from what they're doing there to try and match that and keep that with that essence within the session. So that's I guess a new frontier for me to be exploring at the moment, which is I find quite enjoyable. Discovering all those little goodies that different artists are using.
That's really nice. It talks a lot about like the circle of learning that I also talked about it with Ermin, that you start at some point, then you go all the way around, and now you're back to this start where you can see all your road and say like, okay, now before I did this all the time, I tried to apply this template, but now I have the knowledge to be able to freely jump into a project and face it and as a different thing and start over. And I trust my skills, and I know what I'm doing. So if I have a sound in mind, I can totally get there.
Yeah, correct.
Do you think that your mixing abilities and your producing abilities, that do you consider consider them your instrument somehow? Do you think that it's part of your instrument inside the band somehow?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the way, I used to be a player. I played drums, and then I picked up guitar and played bass in a band and all that sort of stuff. I was never great, but it was enough to provide me with a knowledge of the instrument and how to communicate with different performers when I'm recording. But yeah, I've spent my entire career learning, production and learning mixing, and that's definitely my instrument. I guess that's the flavor that I bring to any recording that I'm involved with, even to the point where, like, at the moment I'm working on songs of my own with a friend that we're writing an album together, have written an album together, and
Nice.
I'm not necessarily the executor. He's a much more talented musician than I am, but I'm still coming up with the parts and using the production as a way to write the songs, and I can still coming up with melodies and all that sort of stuff, and that's just my tool to getting the songs finished, as opposed to the actual picking up an instrument and performing. So it's it's definitely my instrument.
Yeah, I think it's also very important, grabbing your comment before, that it's very important for a producer to grab the instruments and play them. You don't need to be like a super virtuoso of the instrument, but it's very good to grab the instrument and understand how it works, and then, like, from that perspective you can actually take the voice out of that instrument when you record it. Would you agree?
Yeah, most definitely. And I think as a producer, like, you're a sounding board for ideas and knowledge, I guess, for when you're recording artists. So you need to have a good understanding of what they're doing with their instrument, and knowing an instrument inside out is pretty essential, I think, especially the complexities of things like guitars and basses and that sort of thing, and amplifiers and that sort of stuff. Like, those are highly technical instruments, so knowing how to get the best performance out of it, and especially in the genre that I'm working in a lot, which is the heavy detuned stuff, you've got to be really precise with a lot of those things. So there's just techniques and ideas with tuning and things like that which really facilitate a better recording and a better performance from the artist.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree. Well, I also consider, like, producing is a lot of, like, creativity. It takes a lot of creativity. And how would you, for example, when you're in this creative process, like, do you face creative block, or if you're, for example, now doing your own music, like, if you face it, how do you move forward from it?
Just time. Creative blocks are tricky, and I just find fresh ears is the easiest way to get past creative blocks. Just going off to something else. So, inevitably, I've always got tasks that need to be done, whether it's mixing a track or editing something, or even just doing accounts or whatever it might be. So I can always I find for me it works best if I just go away and just do all the stuff that's just really process based that I know I need to do. And then I can come back with fresh ears a day later or a week later and understand things a lot better and get a fresh vibe of stuff. I mean, the stuff that I've been writing has taken 4 years. I think we started probably 4 years ago. So it's just been a consistent thing of coming back to it and chipping away at it. So there's definitely been huge roadblocks there along the way, but yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, always fresh ears, of course, help, but how to get them? Sometimes people, like, even if they have fresh ears, they don't have this fresh mind to come up with new ideas. And I don't know. For me, for example, it helps a lot to go outside. Like, I was also talking with Ermin that, like, for me, just a second. Just a second. I will edit this part.
You got office people coming in.
Yeah, no, first people. Yeah, but yeah, I can edit from here. So yeah, I was thinking that, for example, for me, like, what helps a lot to face creative block is to go outside and, like, to do some sports or to distract myself with my friends, but think something else. If I work on audio, or if I start editing, or, like, sitting on the studio at the same time, I cannot really, like, get my mind clear. But to go outside to play a football match, or just to go to the gym or whatever, go swimming or whatever you can do in Finland outside. But that helps for me. But for you, is editing, or like you just continue with different tasks, or?
Well, true. That's sort of like my day to day. But funny you mentioned that going for walks and stuff. Is that's exactly what we do. The guy that I'm riding with, Mitch, we on the Gold Coast here. There's a whole like hinterland, which is like full of jungle and rainforest and cliffs and mountains and stuff. And so we've basically been going on giant walks up and down these hills for. We should go in the morning, early in the morning, and then get into the studio and have a real burst of creativity after that. So getting out to nature is essential. That's the best part about living here on the Gold Coast. You got the beach and then you got the jungle. So it's great.
Okay, that's nice landscape you have there. So how for example a normal day looks for you? Do you have any routines in the morning, or do you work in the morning, you work at nights, or it doesn't really matter for you? Or are you strict with your timetables? Do you have any like strict routine that you respect every day?
Kind of, yeah. I'm pretty early riser, so I get up with the sun essentially, and I've slowly, as I've gotten older, it's definitely shifted more towards this. In the early days, I was a night owl, and would stay up in the studio until all crazy hours and do really long days and that sort of stuff. But I mean, I think I'm sort of repeating what every person who's been in the industry for a decade or more, is that you start to reduce those hours and just work really efficiently and productively in the daylight hours. When I need to, I do late nights with bands, but it's like if we're doing a full 8, 10, 12 hour day during the daytime, and starting at 9 o'clock in the morning sort of thing, I try and impress those hours upon any artist that I'm working with through a recording process, because that just suits my waking hours. But when I need to do late hours, I will. But generally I'll work just daylight hours like a regular person, and that's also to do with family life as well. I've got a wife, and she wants to see me when she gets home from work. So it's no good if I'm working until midnight every night and not seeing her at all during the process. So I think it's just a smarter way to exist while I can. And I do a lot of work from I've got my studio at home, so I sort of tailor my hours around to match hers. So when she walks out the door, I rock straight into the studio and start doing work, and then sort of down tools when she gets home and go and make dinner and do all the the home stuff. So that's my routine. And it definitely works for me. So I really enjoy. I much prefer doing it like this than those crazy, getting to the studio at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and then working through until 4 in the morning sort of thing. That kills you after a while. So
yeah. No, I agree. And you have your studio at home now. How does it, for example, like I think that it's when I had a studio outside of my home, it was very nice, the feeling of just like waking up in the morning, have your coffee, have your breakfast, like spend time with your girlfriend or wife, and then like just go to work, and then you just go out, you arrive to the studio, and you're in a different set of mind. How do you keep that balance, like having the studio like inside, like on your home? Because it's very difficult, at least for me, it was very difficult to draw the line where when am I working and when am I having a little bit of free time. My breaks were just going to my kitchen, and then like you get stuck there somehow sometimes, or frustrated, or I don't know, like how do you face this balance of having your studio in the same place where you live?
It just works for me.
Okay.
The reason why is, I had an external studio for 7 years or so, or more, even longer. It would have been in the last couple of years that I've been doing. I've only had the home studio for 3 years, but what I found was that I was doing so much work on my own. Mixing is a solo job really, that I was just doing weeks without seeing anyone really, like during the mixing process of different things. And I just was fine working on my own, and had the commitment to do, the drive to just do what needed to be done, and I enjoy what I do. So transferring that to a home environment didn't seem too different, and there's no distractions at home really if there's no one else around. So I just got on with the job. So I don't have any problem working from home. In fact, I kind of prefer it. The only thing I do miss from a external studio environment is sort of, the camaraderie of, other people working on projects, and you kind of get someone into the room and they listen to what you're working on, and then you go and check out what they're doing, that sort of thing. That's always great. Yeah. I do miss that. But just the home environment just really works for me. So. It's just for mixing, I can do vocals in here as well, and if I need to do drums and bass and lad recording and that sort of stuff, there's a studio I'll go and use. But for all the computer sitting in front of speakers and that sort of thing, I've just got a good setup here, and treated the room and all that sort of stuff that needed to be done for a home studio, and it's just working really well.
Yeah, okay, I agree with that. But for some people, it's not that easy of a balance to keep. So that's nice to hear. Yeah. So if you work at home, like if I can jump a little bit to your gear, like what are you using now? For example, now that you moved your studio to your home, I guess that maybe you cannot have some gear that you had before, or maybe you don't need it anymore. You just like jumped into software for most things, or how do you keep your balance between your analog gear and your digital gear? What do you keep nowadays? Which one would be like your to-go setup, or something that you cannot live without?
Well, I've got all the same gear that I had in the studio. So,
okay.
I've got, so the good thing about this setup is I've got another room next door, and that's like my machine room, I guess, that's where the computer and the interfaces and stuff live. And I've got all that in a rack, so that's all kind of noisy, and I can close the door and this room be very quiet. And I've got this little desk here which has got all my outboard gear on it. I've got about 16 ins and outs worth of gear here into my Pro Tools HDX system. So that's been a consistent thing for since I started doing this really for myself. So I got a Pro Tools TDM system in around 2005, I think, and then upgraded to HDX at about 2010 or 2011, and I've just been using that consistently. I've still got the same old Intel Mac 2010 model computer. I've upgraded it a little bit, but it's just been solid and still doing everything I needed to do. And that's my setup. So that's carried through from when I had the studio space as well. The only difference being here is that all my microphones are just in a cupboard and don't really get used as much here. But I've still got all my gear. I've still got all the amps and stuff in the garage. But they just get trucked out to the studio whenever I need to use them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you cannot keep everything, of course, there. Like,
yeah,
I can't have to go to the storage.
Yeah, I can't have it all set up in this particular room. But it's all there, ready to go when I do need to use it. So, yeah.
Yeah, if you don't mind, and if you want to talk about it, can you go a little bit like through your setup?
Yep. Yeah. So I've got Pro Tools HD with the latest version, and I think it's 2018.4 or something, and that's been my DAW forever. That's just what I use. It works really well. I've dabbled in all the other ones, and everyone has got their favorite one. So Pro Tools is the one for me. And I have got I've got a 192 and a HDIO 16 in and out, and that's permanently connected to all my outboard gear. So I've got a couple of distressors, a Fatso, LA2A 1176, a couple of DBX 160s. I've got a API 2500, which is being repaired right now, but that I've got Transient Designer, 4 channels, and a Phoenix, Thermionic Phoenix compressor. So that's kind of my outboard, Axe FX, and that's kind of my day-to-day gear that I use. And I've got PSI A21M monitors. So that's my, I've been using all that for probably the last 5 years, I'd say. So that's, it's been working well. I haven't really acquired any new analog gear for some time because UAD is really good.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. So, for example, have you replaced anything, any gear that before you used in analog and you had it? Did you, for example, sell it and just buy the UAD plugin and just go from there with that, or?
I did. Yeah.
For example, which one would that be?
The SSL the OWL Smart compressor. The C2, I think it was. Only because I just feel like that's the most emulated compressor, maybe after the 1176. So I just feel like I had a lot of great versions of that. I love the mix knob, like the wet dry mix knob, and all the new ones that are coming out. I find that doing a decent amount of compression on my mixes, but then half of it is a really good approach. And it's just a little bit trickier doing that, a bit more routing and messing around with that gear. And then I did actually just do some shootouts with it, and it was just like, it's not that it sounds bad, but I can get what I need. So I mean, truth be told, I don't really use my 1176 anymore either, because the plugins are so solid. So there are a few bits of gear. I mean, I don't turn the DBXs on too often these days. LA2A I use all the time for vocal recording. That's great. And all the Empirical Lab stuff, the Distressors and the Fatso, always get a good workout. So does the Phoenix. But it's hard to justify forking out for analog gear when the UAD stuff I've done shootouts with a few of these things, like the Fatso, the Distressors, the API 2500, because they've got the equivalent models in the UAD, and the UAD is right. I can't tell the difference really. Yeah. So,
how do you think, for example, that nowadays that everything is moving like more towards the digital form, and that when you're working in a session, then you start, for example, with the recording, and then like you go through the editing process, and then you start adding, like when the mixing process starts to come, then you start adding stuff, and then maybe when you're finishing, then that you can always go back all the way to the editing, for example. How do you like that part of this new digital era, and how do you keep your balance of not keep going back to where you started? Because like maybe nowadays you are much more sure of what you're doing. Like, for example, maybe the first time that you apply a filter on somewhere, it's right, and then you never go back to it. Or do you appreciate that you can always go back? Or do you like more the analog workflow of just committing yourself to like printing tracks, or like freezing them, or like, okay, I'm not gonna touch this anymore? How do you face that workflow?
Well, I think that's where I sort of put the mixing process, and I guess why I am a mixer as well, because I put a lot of weight into the final process of mixing to really make things sound good. So I've kind of oscillated between wanting to be this guy who just in a recording process just commits everything and plugs in a compressor and goes, that's the sound, bang, let's record it, commit. And I always kind of come back to the thing in the mixing process. It's such an analytical stage that maybe some of those decisions, because you're recording in an environment that's not your mixing environment, so it's not necessarily, it's a foreign studio, it's not set up to be as critical sometimes. Over here in Australia, it's not always like that, so you can't be as critical of what you're doing with those devices and the compressors and EQs and stuff. So I often have found myself regretting maybe some of the choices I've made in those instances, so and wanting to go back to what it was originally, the raw sounds. So I sort of put a lot of weight in the mixing process and know that I can do a lot of crafting of the sounds in the mixing process, and want to leave things as raw and as open as I can in the studio. But like I said, I I kind of vary that. Sometimes I'll just go into a project and just go, yeah, we're going to EQ everything, and that's how it's going to work that way because we've got access to those, EQs or compressors or whatever. But so I'm still a little bit cautious these days. Even 15 years on, I'm still, when I get into a studio and I see a whole rack full of gear, I'm kind of like, I probably won't use it when I'm recording. But if I was mixing here and I knew the sound and I knew the speakers and I knew how everything always sounded, then I'd be reaching for it all day, every day. Like when I was down in Melbourne and had the SSL studio there. To mix stuff. Whenever I was mixing on the SSL, I'd always turn every bit of gear on and try and almost use every gear just for the hell of it. And that was great fun. But I knew the space and I was comfortable working in there and mixing in there, so that was okay. But yeah, doing stuff in the recording side of things is a bit tricky. So I always like to be able to go back to the rawest state of something, and that kind of ties into a little bit of my workflow, which I learned the hard way early on in my career, is always having access and doing incremental saves so that you can always have access to the initial idea or the earliest stage of a recording. So like when I'm working through my session with a band, every day or every half day that I've worked on a session, I'll incrementally save it so that all the save session backups are saved with a different name. So I can pinpoint and go back to the moment, like the second that a piece of audio was created, and find the session that was saved when that was created.
Yeah, so that digital workflow helps you to go back to those moments and save different files on your mixing stage. So you can always go back and, okay, if my early stage of mixing sounded like this and my late stage of mixing sounds like this, have I actually nailed it? Have I fucked it up somewhere? Or is there something wrong going on here? Have I overworked it? That's a really nice thing about the digital form nowadays. I guess that also like something that has been lost from like, I guess that from the old days is that before the engineer was like he had to pretty much, like, for example, place the mic, EQ the thing on the console, and then go straight to the tape or like computer back then, like if possible. And that mastery of EQing the stuff or compressing the stuff before recording was something very precious back then. But now it's like people don't need that kind of commitment anymore because you can always go back.
Yeah, there's so much freedom with what you can do these days. So yeah, definitely don't need to commit things. But it's definitely a skill. It's to have that confidence to do that and commit things as they're going down. But it's just that the nature of music's changed so much since the era of doing that in recordings, and it's just a different time. I mean, arguably recordings sound nicer these days because people can spend more time, tweaking things and notching out frequencies and, just working a mix to it's just balanced and sounding really great. Whereas I probably a lot of the time in the past, those tools, those finessing sort of tools weren't available. So, things sounded raw and just different. But like it's one of those things. It's arguably, there's an essence that maybe we've lost because of all that attention to detail these days.
Yeah, like, so of course some positive things come and some maybe negative things just evolve, and that's the way they are. And coming back to the analog stuff that we were talking about, that for example I was also working in a studio where a friend had a big SSL console, and like one day I went to record some drums there, and I had to, like, as you said, I wanted to play with the EQs and like try to apply some of the stuff so I could have some kind of analog ready sound for those drums. And then I figured like it was just because it was not my console. Like the two of the EQ channel strips were a little bit rusty, and they were creating noise in exactly that point of the filter, and I ended up fucking 2 tracks because the channels were like not working properly. And that sort of thing you only know when the analog gear is yours, that you know that it's completely, it's fine, it just has been renewed, the caps have been changed or like whatever, or it has some flaws and you know exactly where they are and what not to use, for example. That's kind of tricky when you jump into somebody else's studio and you try to use those pieces of gear that have been there for 50 years, 40 years, and then it's not yours. You know, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. So it's a risky move.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's been 100% the case in every studio that I've ever worked with an analog console. There's always one, you know, dicky fader or EQ or whatever that's just going to, you know, be a bane of your existence. You know, like when I always remember mixing on the SSL console, it's always like, you know, you're 3/4 of the way through a mix and then your vocal channel just starts crackling. You know, it's like, oh, okay, I've got to find another channel, and you've already used all the channels and you got to repatch everything and sacrifice something, and that's just analog. Yeah, so that's definitely why I think people have embraced this whole digital, you know, recording process, because everything you press open session and everything comes back sounding exactly the way you left it, which is just magic. You know, even now I've got analog gear and I've got a unit that I can't use because it's out being repaired because something was going wrong with it, and you know, ironically I've got the plug-in. I just use the plug-in now instead. So it's just a much more efficient way of recording and mixing, and I think it's also allowed this state that we're in now, you know, the home studio and mixing from home or whatever, just on a computer with a pair of speakers. It's enabled that to a great degree. So you don't need, you know, bucket loads of equipment and all that sort of stuff in your studio to do a great job, which is fantastic.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it is definitely. And do you, for example, have any knowledge, or did you study any electronics? For example, do you repair your own analog equipment, or did you study any music production or music theory? What's your knowledge, like your studying background?
My study background was actually in a theatre background. Yeah. Nice. Well, it was a course over in Western Australia in Perth, it's quite a good little course because it gave us an introduction to all aspects of audio. So we were doing, you know, live sound mixing, recording, then film, audio, post-production, TV, all those things that apply to audio. So it was a very engineering-based background, but we were able to focus on our the sort of stream that we wanted to be involved in. So I was really always involved in the studio. I just wanted to record music. That was my thing. So I did a little bit of film stuff and did a little bit of theatre, and like we, strapping lapel wireless microphones onto singers and that sort of stuff. I was doing musical theatre and that sort of business. So we sort of covered everything. So that was a good little education in all aspects of audio. So through my years, I've done jobs here and there, all different sorts of stuff. But so always sort of come back to this, to wanting to be in the studio and work with musicians. So that's my background. I think within that course we did a small course on electronics, so I've got a very basic understanding, but that whole thing is wizardry to me, same as what you guys do with the software stuff. It's just like I've got no concept of that. I mean, I did a little bit of programming in high school, but nothing like what's going on these days. So it's you guys are wizards as far as I can tell. So, yeah.
So, how have you liked what we have done? Have you used the Darkglass products before? How do you like the Neural DSP emulation of them?
Oh,
what have you used them into? Have you experimented with them? Like, we would love to know your opinion on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Darkglass plugin that Neural have done is just amazing. I mean, it sounds just like the Darkglass pedals, which is excellent, because I mean those pedals have really become a staple, I think, for a lot of people recording, because they just got a really like correct sound, is the way I like to describe it. Like you put it on a bass guitar, and you just go, that's the type of distortion that I want to hear on that. And that was always a struggle for me. I found, even though I feel like I've successfully recorded some really good bass tones in the past, it was like when I first heard like the B7K pedal. It was just like, oh, these guys have just put it in a pedal. It's excellent. Like, it's just like, it's the sound that I want to hear when I hear gritty bass, you know. So that was excellent. So then having access to that in a plugin was just like, oh, excellent. Now I can put it on, you know, any DI that comes my way. So yeah, that's magic. I mean, and having it as a plugin, like, it just expands the options and the possibilities of what you can do with that particular tone sound. You know, trying on vocals and on drums is really cool as well. So yeah, it's definitely getting a thorough workout in my mixing at the moment. So I'm definitely excited to see what else you guys come up with as well.
Yeah, we're working on some new stuff. We'll tell you later about it.
Cool, excellent.
So what else have you used it for? Like, you have tried it on drums, you say, for example. Specifically, where on drums have you tried it on kick drums, or you like it more in cymbals, for example? I've tried it in vocals. It also works quite fine.
Yeah,
but you know, I've tried it in everything. But you know.
Yeah, no, I've tried it on a few different parts. So what I've actually had success in it is on, like, dirtying up room sounds, and yeah, it's just sort of messing with those, like, and especially like little sections where you really want the drums to get really super aggressive, or yeah, just like pop out for a little like drum break or something like that. I have used it in that bit specifically in a song. So. But I mean, it's again, like, it's got so many possibilities because of the way that the pedal or the plugins is arranged. You know, you've got a huge scope for the EQ and the overall shape of the sound anyway. So you could probably apply it to numerous source sounds. But I think I think it definitely works really well on drums. Yeah.
Yeah, and plus, like, now there's this, like, the stereo switch that enables you to treat the stereo signals. I guess that's also a very big advantage from the plugin.
I've used it on synths, so I was just trying to think of the other one. Just using it on bass synths to really gritty them up, and just make it just. I mean, because it's a distortion, it's kind of a compressor in the same sentence, and so it's, you know, really squashes sounds out and makes them stick out in the mix a little bit more. So yeah, it's been wicked for that.
Yeah, that's what we also explained it in our one of our release videos, that how we used it on synths, for example, and how this compression of that the distortion applies, it gets like it boosts all your effects happening before on the chain, and it crafts a completely new sound. It's also, and the pedal has its own frequency response. The plugin has its own frequency response, so it creates while you just drop it in, it just like changes completely the game. So it's very interesting to try.
It does it actually does quite a lot of different things to the bottom end as well. Like, I find that you can really change the shape of the bottom end on bass or synth or something like that. It's got a bottom end that needs controlling, and it does quite a lot of different shapes of that, especially between the two different pedals. So there's always a bit of experimenting going on whenever I reach the plugin, because there's so many options there, you know, to play with. So different sounds within the one plugin.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so, well, jumping to something else, and who do you think that was like your first big artist that like settled you down to say yourself like, okay, I can actually do this for a living, or I really, you know, I can afford myself doing this, and this is going in the right path? Or which was the jump that told you, hey, this is the right thing to do?
It would be Karnivool, Aussie prog band from Perth, and it was probably because I made a decision to. I was over in America at the time, working in Los Angeles, and that was my goal. I'd moved over there. I was like, I'm gonna, you know, do this, go for you know, assistance work and all that sort of stuff in studios in LA, and I'd been doing it for about 6 months, and then they asked me to come back and do their album, and they had sent me a demo disc, and I just loved it. I just fell in love with the songs and them as an artist, and I was just like, I really like want to do their album, and they wanted me to do the album, so that was kind of the catalyst for me moving back to Australia and working on on that first album of theirs. And that was also, I had applied, doing that album, I applied a lot of the knowledge that I'd learned in those 6 months in LA to making that record, which is the main thing. I think when I say that is just the attention to detail and just the getting everything exactly how you wanted it to sound sort of thing, and working, tirelessly on, getting the performance right. And so anyway, that was that album, and that was released and had great success, and it did really well for the band, and it did really well for me. So I think that kind of kickstarted my career as a producer in Australia and probably overseas as well. So that would be the artist.
Yeah, that's awesome work you did there. So congratulations on that. That's nice to hear.
Thanks.
And also, what kind of internet knowledge would you consider nowadays useful for people that are starting, or people that want to go deeper into their knowledge? Or what would you think that it's something that you would recommend? Any, for example, in the forums that you started, or do you think that there's some very good mixing guides somewhere there, or would you just recommend to put your hands dirty into the DAW and just do songs and try and learn by mistake? What would you think it's like? What would you recommend? Any books or?
Yeah, I was always just hands-on. I never really did the forum thing or learnt off anybody per se. I mean, I felt like I skipped a little bit of the learning process, whether that's to my detriment or not. But yeah, I feel like I was probably a little bit slow in learning all the skills. But I sort of didn't do a lot of the assisting work, so I sort of just launched straight into doing my own recordings with a lot of artists, which in itself was a great learning experience, because I was sort of taking on all the roles of the engineer and the assistant and the producer and everything, and having to apply those in those sessions. So I learnt a lot. But I sort of didn't. I see a lot of guys that I've worked with who have spent years as an assistant, and they've just already got this massive, cache of knowledge that I felt like I sort of had to learn the hard way. So you could definitely learn a lot from watching other people, and I think the key to getting your foot in the door and doing well in this industry is the bottom sort of idea is just networking. I think that's the main thing. Like, you can be average at your skills, and you can be you can be fresh and inexperienced, but if you've got good networking skills, you can get yourself into the right position to build that knowledge and build those skills up. So I think having a good sort of networking ability, or being able to present yourself in a way that people are going to take you on board for a project, whether it's as an assistant or whether it's just a work experience. I mean, I did a whole stack of work when I was starting out as just for free, just as whether it was work experience or whether it was just me doing a job, but just doing it for no money. And I know that led to more opportunities, and that's I think that in this industry where you're a specialist and it's a creative professional, I guess, that's how it works. I mean, there's a very small section of jobs available for assistants in studios, but then the rest of you have to kind of go and make your own way. So I think making yourself available to artists for free is a good first step to getting your foot in the door, and then you can sort of go, okay, well, we had a great result from me working really hard and doing this for no money. We did one song and everyone loves it. Let's do another song, but this time I'm going to have a fee. And that I think that's the way that I successfully sort of made a career for myself. So I think that could still apply these days. I think it's what I see these days with podcasts and online tutorials and stuff is that the knowledge and the information is so available now, whereas it probably wasn't quite as accessible via the internet when I was sort of starting out. So I sort of slugged through the learning curve doing it myself, but you can definitely fast track it by jumping online and watching all these tutorials and stuff. But I still think it comes back to just hands-on. hands-on learning is really how you do it. Like, no, like you can watch someone EQ a drum kit all you want, but it's not going to make any sense to you until you start doing it. Because the thing is, you're going to have a different drum kit to the one that they've got in the video. So, you know, unless you have some sort of hookup to get it. But yeah, like, you know, every day I'm mixing different drum kits. So what one guy's video shows to how to EQ a drum kit, it's not going to apply to the next one. You know, they're just different microphones, different setups. You know, just there's so many variables. So just having that day after day experience of just tweaking on different sounds and knowing what sounds right. That's, I think, how you really build your skills up if you're sort of talking about a mixing sort of point of view. And in the recording phase of things, again, that's just it just comes to hands-on experience. So the more you can get into an environment, whether you're recording artists and just doing whatever you can to build your knowledge up, the better you'll get.
Yeah, for sure. And for example, like jumping a little bit back, do you think that, for example, music theory for you is important in production wise, or you don't really mind about it? It's just you just trust your ears, or for example, if there's some chord that is wrong and you want to correct it, do you think it's a important tool for you, or not really?
Well, I don't really have any musical theory knowledge. I mean, I do, because I kind of learned a few things along the way. And I did a little bit of it at uni, and I guess I understand a little part of it, but I haven't ever dived into, you know, getting really technical with the music theory side of things. And I do feel like that has served me quite well, and on relying on my instinct and a lot of those things, where I'm not not critical of pitch and timing and, you know, chords, but at the same time, sure, there's probably been instances where, had I known the answer to what note to play within a chord or something like that, that it would have become easier and it would have been less of an exploration to find what works. But I feel like I could always learn more, but it hasn't. I don't think it's hindered me to this point, not knowing a lot of that sort of stuff. And I see a lot of artists who have no knowledge at all. All they've done is have picked up an instrument and they've just started outputting, you know, sounds, and they don't understand any of that sort of stuff. I've seen more people that I record have got that approach than I do record people with a technical musical theory background. And those people I always find are creative, you know, and they've got no restrictions on how things can sound. They've got their own unique sound because they just do. So that, I think, has always stuck with me, that I feel like I don't need to have a huge musical theory background to work with these artists, because they don't know it themselves. And so there is a little bit of a part of me that feels like if I had this really deep knowledge of musical theory, that it might be a little bit restricting, but maybe not.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. And what things, for example, you wish that you would have known when you started, or during your path, that you could have made more efficient, or some moments on your career that you regretted, like spending 1 year on, like, you know, compressing something wrong, or like using the wrong gear for something, or the wrong mic, or something that you would do again, or something like that.
Something to avoid if I was doing it all again. That is a hard question.
Like, for example, for me, it was I was like first trying to, you know, when I first started, I was like trying to clean my low end so much that in the end things started to sound thin, and I was like, I thought that was cleaning the low end, but I was actually cutting like too much, and then all of a sudden my mixing sounded like super sharp but no low end at all, for example. And like those sort of things. Or did you, for example, when you were starting, did you read the wrong thing, and then you tried to apply it, and then by learning by your mistake, you figured out that you were doing wrong, even though people told you that was the way to do it, you know?
I mean, I've probably done all of those things, you know, made plenty of mistakes along the way, but they're, you know, as I say, they're all just learning tools. So I'm just trying to think if there's any bozo moment that I've had. That
maybe not. If there's nothing, then great, man.
I mean, yeah, things like I had this conversation with a buddy of mine who does a lot of assisting with me as well, and I throw a lot of editing and stuff to him and tuning vocals and that sort of stuff. But like that whole thing of with DAWs and tuning and editing and stuff, I just feel like it's something that can be done too much. And I, you know, like to the point, I remember reading an Andy Wallace interview at one point where he was talking about seeing guys edit performances to the point where he goes, you can't hear what they're doing, so there's no point in editing it to that extreme. And I was probably right at that point when I read that interview. It was probably 10 years ago. I was just deep into like I can edit the shit out of this and make this sound just as tight as ever, and Pro Tools the hell out of it. And I just had this like, oh, that's me. He's talking about me. Okay, I need to rethink this. And so even now, the recordings that I'm doing and handballing it to my editing guy, I'm just having this conversation of like, yeah, don't do too much. Just do it. If you're doing it, just make sure you can hear what you're doing, and then leave it alone. And that's I think that's probably something that I should have learned earlier on.
Oh, that's a very good tip. Yeah.
And the tuning vocal thing, it's definitely used to a great degree in a lot of music these days, and I feel like the great vocal performances are often ones where it's. I feel like if I hear it all over a vocal, it just sounds like it's a lazy vocalist or it's a lazy producer or editor or whatever. So I kind of sort of try to make my tuning these days something that's, unless it's used as a distinct effect, it seems to be something that's understated. So that's probably the other one for me.
Yeah, for sure. Like over editing stuff, then everything sticks to the grid and everything is so like mathematically quantized, and it sounds very unnatural at some point when you get obsessed with it. And like cleaning all the noises and like getting like all the leakage away from the drums and all the breaths away from the vocals. It starts sounding very strange and very like sounds like a computer by the end of the day. And also, for example, I was talking with some other friends that in electronic music you have to, for example, I've been doing electronic music lately, you have to do completely the opposite. You want to take those sounds off the grid. So it's completely the opposite type of approach. But yeah, I completely agree that editing can go a little bit over the top, and also vocal tuning, it's a very tricky thing. And maybe to finish, like I think that we are about on time. And what one anecdote, stories or life tips would you like to share with us or with your audience, or how would you like to finish this? Maybe some questions for the Neural DSP team, or when are you coming to Finland?
As soon as I can.
It's a long flight, though.
No, I went to the UK started last year, and that was a long flight. But I don't know. I mean, I guess the world is your oyster, really, with all this sort of stuff. I mean, there's so much knowledge online, and there's so many people out there with great ideas and great approaches that you can learn from. So, I mean, if that's I guess what you're kind of watching these interviews and stuff for, is to get a good launch pad, I guess, for your own skills and ideas and career. So it's just get out there and try it. I can't really think of anything to ask you guys. I mean, I'm fascinated by what you guys do there over at Neural DSP and what you got around the corner. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what's coming next out of that brains trust over there.
Yeah, it's a brainstorm here, and it's crazy. But we're moving forward, and that's really exciting. What's waiting for us in the future?
Cool.
And one little small question I wanted to ask, like if you would be, for example, in a desert island, like in the middle of nowhere, and you would have, for example, your laptop and like your Pro Tools with everything that it comes with, which would be the 3 pieces of software or 3 pieces of gear that you would like choose to be able to push a mix through, for example, something that you can't like live without?
Are we just talking?
Let's say that you can plug your gear in that island or whatever. If it's the distressor, for example, let's say that you can plug it in, just, you know.
Yeah, so we're talking hardware and software, or
whatever. Like if you pick something like.
Yeah. Oh, I mean. So if we got Pro Tools, then
yeah, you got everything that comes with it. Yeah,
that kind of covers it. I mean, it's really that. In essence is a tool that allows me to do what I do day to day. So, I mean, plugins, you know, there's thousands of great plugins. I've got, you know, a lot of great plugins that I really love, but I just the functionality of Pro Tools is just something I really enjoy, and I feel like I can do most of the tips and tricks and stuff that I see online and all that sort of stuff using Pro Tools, and it just gets me excited every time they bring out a new release and update a new feature and that sort of stuff. So that's definitely number 1 on that list. I mean, I think I probably didn't quite touch on it before, but having when you have your home studio and you've got a mixing space, like having the consistency of a set of speakers and really learning them and knowing what they sound like is super important, I think, to getting a great result. So, even if you
speakers is a good call.
Yeah, so even if you don't have great speakers, just knowing what your speakers sound like. I mean, a lot of people do the car test, go and take their mixes into the car, which luckily I don't need to do these days because I'm so familiar with these PSI speakers. So, the next one on my list would be the PSI speakers, because they just... they just do everything I need to do to make audio sound good. So they're killer. And in that same sentence, the Atom subs that I'm using are Magic as well, the Sub Mark II, I think they are. So those guys. And then a piece of gear, like... I mean, just plugins in general. Like, I just love plugins. I'm addicted.
Yeah, there's too many. There's too many to pick one. I understand.
I am addicted.
Well, let's say for this sake, that is the Neural DSP.
Of course it is.
Darkglass Ultra for this time. Since
definitely.
you don't have one, I'll put it on your mouth.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Well, it was really nice to talk to you, man, and I hope that you have an awesome weekend and that
Thanks.
You enjoy Australia, and I
walking
hope
in
that
the
we
jungle.
can see you here from Europe.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I was saying I'm going to go for a bushwalk to clear the head. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but see you next time, man, and thanks for being with us in Inside the Machine podcast, and catch you up again later.
Thank you very much.